My parents lied to me. Now, they're paying the price. Before we begin the story, take a moment to support us by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Your support means the world to our channel and helps us spread more shocking true stories to light. Now, let's get started. My name is Jason, and I'm 28 years old. If you ask my parents to describe me, they'd probably call me the difficult one. Not because I was reckless or irresponsible. Quite the opposite. I worked hard, paid my bills, and built a stable life for myself. But in their eyes, that just meant one thing. I was the fixer, the one who had it together, the one they could always rely on. And by they, I mean my parents, but more specifically, my older sister, Rachel. Rachel was 31, but you'd never guess it from the way she lived. She bounced from job to job, never lasting more than a few months before quitting or getting fired. And somehow, it was never her fault. Her bosses were unfair, her coworkers toxic, the economy impossible. Excuse after excuse. Meanwhile, she lived like a nomad, drifting between my parents' house and whatever friend was kind or clueless, enough to let her crash on their couch. I learned early on that if I wanted a peaceful, stable life, I had to set boundaries. But that was easier said than done. My parents had mastered the art of guilt tripping. Family helps family, Jason. You should be grateful you're doing well. Rachel's struggling, and you're just going to ignore that. That's why I fought so hard to make it clear. I wasn't Rachel's safety net. I wasn't her emergency fund. And I sure as hell wasn't going to be the one constantly picking up the pieces of her bad decisions. At least, that's what I thought. What I didn't realize was that my parents weren't respecting those boundaries. They were just waiting for the right moment to trample all over them. And that moment? Well, it came at a family dinner I will never forget. The setup. I should have seen the signs the moment I walked into my parents' house. My mom was being extra nice, too nice. My dad was uncharacteristically quiet, like he was bracing himself for something. And Rachel? She could barely look at me. She just sat there, poking at her food like a guilty kid caught sneaking out past curfew. Something was up. At first, dinner seemed normal enough. We made small talk. My mom threw in a few passive-aggressive remarks about how I never visit anymore, and I did my usual routine of nodding along while counting down the minutes until I could leave. Then, just as I was starting to think I'd made it through without drama, my mom set down her fork, folded her hands on the table, and hit me with it. "So, Jason," she said, her voice sickly sweet, the tone she always used when she was about to say something I really wasn't going to like. "Your sister is going to be moving in with you for a little while." I almost choked on my food. The room went dead silent, like they were all waiting for me to just accept it and move on. But I didn't say a word. Not yet. I just sat there, staring at them, waiting for the rest of the explanation, because there was always more. And sure enough, my mom kept going. "She's had a really rough time lately," she continued, as if this was just common sense. "And you have that nice apartment all to yourself. It just makes sense, you know? You can help her get back on her feet, and she won't be a burden on us." There it was. A burden on them. Because heaven forbid my parents actually tell Rachel to take responsibility for her own life. No, of course not. That was my job, apparently. Still, I said nothing. I just let them talk, let them lay out their little plan like it was set in stone. My dad finally decided to chime in. "It's not like you can't afford it, son," he added, his voice firm. "She just needs a stable place for a while, and it'll really help her figure things out." That was when Rachel finally spoke. "It'll only be for a few months," she said, her voice almost too rehearsed. Like she'd already planned exactly what to say to make this sound reasonable. And like, "I can totally help out with stuff around the apartment too." That was a lie, and we all knew it. Rachel didn't help out with anything. She barely even cleaned up after herself. But still, I didn't react. I just nodded slightly, like I was actually considering it. Because in reality, I was waiting for them to finish their little speech. Waiting for them to really commit to this idea. Waiting for them to make the biggest mistake of all, assuming that I was actually going to go along with it. And when the moment was just right, I exhaled slowly, set my fork down, and nodded. "Okay," I said simply. "The trap is set." For a moment, nobody spoke. My mom blinked, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. My dad looked relieved, like he had been mentally preparing for an argument and was just happy to avoid it. And Rachel? Rachel smirked, like she had won, like this had been some kind of battle, and she had just walked away with the prize. I could already see the gears turning in her head, mentally moving into my apartment, deciding where she'd put her things, picturing herself lounging on my couch like she belonged there. Why wouldn't she? She had gotten away with this kind of thing before. Growing up, she used to steal my clothes, then act shocked when I got mad about it. In college, she borrowed my laptop and conveniently forgot to return it. And when she got her first apartment and couldn't afford rent, she convinced my parents to guilt-trip me into covering for her. Just this once, of course. Except it never was just once. Rachel wasn't just entitled. She was a professional manipulator. She had perfected the art of making herself look helpless while making me look like the bad guy anytime I pushed back. But this time, she had no idea what was coming. So when she moving in, I asked casually, taking another bite of food, like this was just a normal conversation. My mom practically beamed. Oh, we figured this weekend. That way, she can get settled before she starts looking for work again. I nodded, forcing myself not to smile. Perfect. Rachel stretched her arms behind her head, looking way too pleased with herself. Yeah, I don't have that much stuff anyway. Just some clothes, a few boxes. It won't take long to set up. Sound good, I said, still playing along. Just let me know what time, and I'll be there. And that part? That wasn't a lie. I would be there, just not at my apartment. Because the place Rachel and my parents were about to show up to? Yeah, I hadn't lived there for weeks. It was already sold. It belonged to someone else now. And I wasn't about to stop them. Not yet. I was going to let them find out for themselves exactly what their little plan had gotten them into. The perfect storm. The days leading up to that weekend felt like they dragged on forever. Every time I thought about what was about to happen, I felt a grin tug at the corners of my mouth. But I kept my cool around my parents. I didn't want them sensing anything was off. If they got even a little suspicious, they might start asking questions. Instead, I let the plan unfold exactly as I imagined it, like a slow-motion train wreck, but with me watching safely from the sidelines. Finally, Saturday arrived. I spent the day running errands, knocking out things I had been putting off for weeks. Grocery shopping, a trip to the gym, a stop at my favorite coffee shop, just taking my time, enjoying my own life. Meanwhile, my parents and Rachel were pulling up to my former apartment, their car packed full of her stuff, ready to move her in. And any minute now, they're going to realize that something had gone very, very wrong. Right around noon, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again. This time, I answered. Hello, I said, keeping my voice as casual as possible. There was a pause. Then my mom's voice came through, tight with confusion, frustration creeping in at the edges. Jason, what's going on? In the background, I could hear my dad's voice, rising in irritation. They weren't angry yet. Not yet. Right now, they were just confused. Like people who had walked into what they thought was their house, only to find strangers living there. What do you mean? I asked, playing dumb. We just got here, my mom said, her voice cracking. The apartment's, it's gone, Jason. The landlord says it was sold weeks ago. There's a new tenant living here. What is this? I couldn't help it. A slow, satisfied smile spread across my face. Oh wow, I said, keeping my tone light. That's so weird. There was dead silence on the other end of the line. Then my dad's voice cut in, sharp, demanding. What's going on, Jason? He snapped. Why didn't you tell us? We packed up all of Rachel's things, and now, what the hell are we supposed to do now? It took everything in me not to burst out laughing. I could hear Rachel in the background now, her voice rising, panicked, like she was frantically trying to piece together what had just happened. Oh, this was beautiful. Listen, I said, still playing dumb. I thought you guys knew. I moved out a few weeks ago. Sold the place. Didn't think it was important enough to mention, since, well, it's not my problem anymore. Another long silence. My mom's voice, suddenly small. You sold your apartment? You didn't even tell us? Yeah, I said, taking my time with my words. It was kind of a last-minute thing. Didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But yeah, I moved out. New chapter and all that. My dad's voice went up a notch, frustration turning into full-blown anger. So what are we supposed to do now, Jason? I leaned back in my chair, stretching out, completely relaxed. Oh, I don't know, I said slowly. Figure it out? I could feel the tension through the phone. My mom was still struggling to process it. My dad was seconds away from an explosion, and Rachel. Oh, Rachel. She was losing in the background. You lied to us, my dad muttered, like he still couldn't believe it. You told us everything was fine, that you were happy there. I was happy, I said, smiling to myself. But, things change. Rachel finally snapped. This is bullshit, Jason. Asterisk, she shouted. What the hell is wrong with you? You knew I was moving in. You said it was fine. And this was the moment I had been waiting for. The moment when they realized they had walked straight into a trap. And I had let them. The meltdown. Rachel was screaming now. What the hell is this, Jason? You knew I was moving in, and now you're telling me I have nowhere to go. I could practically see her, arms flailing, face flushed red, barely able to process what just happened. My dad's voice was tight, with barely contained rage. You think this is funny, Jason? You're just going to leave your own sister stranded? I leaned back in my chair, completely unfazed. Stranded? I echoed. That's dramatic, don't you think? I mean, you guys came up with this whole plan without even talking to me about it. I just assumed you had a backup. The silence on the other end of the call was delicious. You're not serious, my mom finally said, her voice shaking. You're not seriously just going to... Oh, I'm serious, Mom. And for the first time, the weight of what I'd done really started to sink in for them. I heard my dad cursing under his breath. My mom still scrambling for some way to turn this around. And Rachel? Rachel was flipping out. This is your fault, she snapped. You're supposed to help me, Jason. That's what family does. I couldn't hold back a laugh at that one. Oh, now we're talking about what family does? I said, amusement dripping from my voice. Where is all this family talk when you're making your decisions, Rachel? Where was it when I was working my ass off to make sure I never had to rely on anyone else? Or does family only count when it benefits you? Her silence was my answer. My mom, still desperate, jumped in. Jason, please. You don't have to let her stay forever, just until she gets settled somewhere else. Just a few months. I cut her off. No. That one word stopped everything. No. My dad's voice was low, dangerous. No, I repeated, calm. Not my problem. Not my responsibility. Not happening. My mom sucked in a sharp breath. You promised. I lied. The silence that followed was deafening. For years, I had been the responsible one. The good son. The one they could manipulate, guilt trip, pressure into fixing things. But not this time. This time I was done. And just to drive the knife in a little deeper, I added, hope you guys have a backup plan. Then, before they could say another word, I hung up. Just like that. No explanations. No more arguments. No more being backed into a corner. It was over. I sat back, exhaling, feeling lighter than I had in years. But I knew it wasn't completely over. Not yet. Because if I knew my parents, and I did, they weren't just going to let this go. They were going to show up. And that was going to be even better. The knock at the door. It had been about an hour since I hung up. An hour of peace. An hour of knowing that somewhere out there, my parents and Rachel were freaking out, scrambling to figure out what to do next. And then, bang, bang, bang. The pounding on my front door echoed through the apartment. Right on schedule. I didn't even have to check. I knew it was them. Still, I walked to the peephole just to enjoy the view. There they were. My mom, standing stiff, arms crossed over her chest, her face twisted with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. My dad, pacing angrily, like he was trying to calm himself down, but failing. And Rachel, standing there with her arms crossed, looking like she was 2 seconds away from losing it completely. And right behind them, their car, trunk wide open, Rachel's bags and boxes stacked in a neat little pile on the sidewalk, like they were still holding on to hope that she was getting in. Oh, this was beautiful. I took a deep breath, forced my expression into something neutral, and then I opened the door. My mom was the first to speak, her voice almost calm. Jason, she started, forcing a strained smile. We tried calling. Yeah, I bet they did. I raised an eyebrow. Did you? I asked, tilting my head like I hadn't seen the dozen missed calls sitting on my phone. My dad cut in, not bothering with pleasantries. You need to fix this, he snapped. Right. Now. I leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed. Fix what exactly? Don't play dumb, Jason, Rachel spat. You lied to us. You let me pack up my whole life just to pull this prank. I blinked at her. A prank. I repeated. Rachel, I moved. I sold my apartment. It's not my fault you didn't ask before assuming you could move in. She let out an incredulous laugh. You're joking. Am I? I shrugged. Because as far as I can tell, the only people responsible for your situation are standing right next to you. My mom's face paled slightly. Jason, please, she tried again, her voice softer now, shifting tactics. You don't have to be so cruel about this. She just needs a place to stay. Just let her in, and we'll talk about it, okay? I tilted my head. Let her in. I echoed. Oh, I see what's happening here. I nodded, pretending like I had just now figured it out. You guys think I still live in some magical, never-ending backup home for Rachel. Like, no matter what happens, no matter how many times she screws up, I'm always going to be here to catch her. I shook my head slowly. Yeah, no. Rachel scoffed. Oh my God, Jason. Stop acting like I'm some criminal. I just need a few months. It's not that big of a deal. I let out a sharp laugh. Rachel, you never need just a few months. I gestured to the bags behind her. You packed up your whole life like you were moving in permanently. Don't insult me by pretending this is temporary. Her face flushed with anger. You're being so dramatic. I sighed, rubbing my temples. All right, I said. Let's cut through all the bullshit start. I straightened up, dropping my arms to my sides. This is my home. Mine. Not yours. Not mom and dad's. Mine. I get to decide who lives here. And guess what? It's not you. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Now, I continued. I'm going to give you all one chance to leave quietly before things get really, really embarrassing for you. My mom's voice trembled. What's that supposed to mean? I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. And then, right in front of them, I started dialing the police. The final warning. The second I pressed the call button, their faces changed. Rachel's smug confidence? Gone. My mom's forced calmness? Shattered. And my dad? My dad froze. Jason, my mom said quickly, her voice tight with panic. Don't do this. I held the phone to my ear, my expression calm. I said, keeping my tone steady. I need to report trespassers at my apartment. Rachel's eyes bulged. Are you serious? She shrieked. My dad took a step forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. You're calling the police on your own family? I didn't blink. Yes, I said simply. Rachel let out a hysterical laugh, but there was panic underneath it. Oh my God, you're actually insane. I turned slightly, still speaking into the phone. They're refusing to leave after being asked multiple times. I said, they've brought bags. They're trying to force their way in, and I'm starting to feel unsafe. Rachel lost it. You're the biggest piece of SH*T I have ever met, Jason, she screamed. I cannot believe you do this to me. Meanwhile, my mom's face had gone ghostly pale. Jason, she whispered, please, think about this. I have, I said coldly. Rachel wasn't done yet. You lied. You let me think I was moving in. You. I cut her off. No, you assumed. I snapped. Because you always assume. You assumed I'd just deal with it, like I always have. You assumed you could just barge into my life whenever it was convenient for you. But guess what, Rachel? I took a step forward, lowering my voice. You assumed wrong. Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, a new sound entered the scene. Sirens. Faint at first, but getting louder. And Rachel's entire body stiffened. Oh my God, she breathed. You actually called them. I tucked my phone back into my pocket and leaned against the doorframe. Yep. My dad swore under his breath. My mom looked like she was about to faint. Rachel? Rachel looked stunned. Because for the first time in her life, there were real consequences, and she did not know how to handle it. The consequences arrived. The sirens got louder. Then, flashing red and blue lights reflected off the windows. Rachel turned white. My mom covered her mouth with her hands. And my dad? He just clenched his jaw, staring at me like he was trying to will me into backing down. Too late for that. A police car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out, One older, looking like he'd seen way too much of this kind of drama, and the other younger, scanning the scene with that sharp, assessing gaze. The older cop spoke first. "Someone here call about trespassing?" I raised my hand. "That was me." Rachel lost it. "Oh my God, Jason," she shrieked. "You actually called the cops on your own family? What the hell is wrong with you?" The officers barely glanced at her. Instead, the younger one turned to me. "Can you explain the situation?" I nodded, keeping my voice calm and level. "These people," I said, gesturing to my parents and Rachel, "showed up at my apartment uninvited. They're trying to force my sister into living here, even after I told them no, and they've refused to leave after being asked multiple times." The older officer turned to my parents. "Is that true?" he asked, his tone neutral. My dad stepped forward. "This is a family issue," he said, forcing his stiff smile. "We don't need the police involved." The officer gave him a flat look. "Sir, that's not how this works." Rachel threw up her hands. "Are you seriously doing this? He said I could live here." "He's lying to you." The younger cop turned back to me. "Do they have any legal claim to live here? Did you sign any agreements, offer her a lease, anything like that?" I almost laughed. "Absolutely not," I said. "This is my apartment. My name is on the lease. They have no right to be here." The officer nodded. "All right, then they need to leave." Rachel's entire body stiffened. "Wait, what?" "You heard him," the older officer said, crossing his arms. "If he says you're trespassing, you're trespassing. And right now, you're trespassing." My mom finally spoke, her voice pleading. "Please, officers, we're just trying to help our daughter. She doesn't have anywhere else to go." The officer didn't even blink. "That's not his problem, ma'am." Rachel exploded. "You have got to be kidding me," she screamed. "You're kicking me out. After everything I've been through." The officer didn't react. "You have two choices," he said evenly. "Leave on your own right now, or we escort you off the property." Rachel looked stunned, like it had never even occurred to her that she could lose, that she could throw a tantrum and not get her way. I leaned against the doorframe, watching the whole thing unfold like a spectator at a show. Because this was beautiful. Finally, my dad clenched his jaw, grabbed one of Rachel's bags, and turned to her. "Let's go." Rachel snapped. "No, I'm not leaving. He owes me." The younger officer took a step closer. "Ma'am, this is your last warning. If you refuse to leave, we will place you under arrest for trespassing." Rachel's face drained of color. "You wouldn't. Try me." Silence. Pure, humiliating silence. Then finally, Rachel grabbed a bag, shoved past my mom, and stormed toward the car. My parents followed. The officers waited, making sure they actually left. Rachel climbed into the car, slamming the door so hard I thought the window might shatter. My dad threw the last of her bags in the trunk, his face twisted in pure rage. And my mom? She looked back at me, eyes full of betrayal. "Jason," she whispered, shaking her head. "I hope you know what you've done." I smiled. "Oh, I do." Then, they got in the car. The engine roared to life. And just like that, they were gone. The aftermath. The second their car disappeared down the street, I let out a slow, satisfied breath. The officers turned back to me. "If they come back, don't hesitate to call," the older one said, giving me a nod. I nodded back. "Will do. Thanks, officers." With that, they returned to their car, pulled away, and suddenly, it was quiet. No yelling, no guilt tripping, no manipulative speeches about family obligations. Just silence. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next favor, the next crisis, the next inevitable phone call dragging me into someone else's mess. For the first time, I had one. And damn, did it feel good. I stepped back inside, locking the door behind me. Then I walked straight to the couch, sat down, and just breathed. Peace. Real, actual peace. That night, I ordered my favorite takeout, put on a movie, and did nothing. No text from my mom. No voicemails from my dad. No Rachel whining about how unfair life was. It was glorious. But of course, the next morning, the fallout began. When I checked my phone, I had dozens of missed calls from my parents. Voicemails filled with a mix of emotions. Raging, begging, guilt-tripping, all of it. Rachel? Oh, she was furious. Her texts were a train wreck of insults and demands. You're a selfish piece of sh*t. How could you do this to me? I haven't know where to go because of you. I hope you rot. Block. Then my mom. Jason, please call me back. I just don't understand how you could do this to your own family. We're all suffering because of this decision. Is that what you wanted? Block. Then my dad. You think you're so damn smart, don't you? One day, you'll need us, and I hope we're not there for you. You've made a huge mistake, son. Block. One by one, I cut them off, because I had no intention of letting them worm their way back in. For the first time, I was truly, completely free. It's in a few weeks now. I've settled into a routine. Work, gym, hanging out with actual friends who don't see me as a human ATM. Life has been peaceful. And Rachel? Last I heard, she's bouncing between couches again, burning bridges left and right. My parents? They've stopped trying to reach out. For now. But honestly, I don't care if they ever do. Because for the first time in my entire life, I chose myself, and I don't regret it for a second. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.